Hey guys, welcome back to this channel. Today we're doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be interviewing one of my close friends, Del. He's a really good numerologist and astrologer. So Del, say hello.
Thank you, Sulabh. How's it going?
Yeah, I'm really good, mate. How are you?
I'm good.
Awesome. We've been talking about getting you on this channel for ages now, so thanks for, we finally got you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into astrology and numerology.
Yeah, well, actually, I ended up getting into numerology first because I had a coworker, and a friend of his would do your numbers in his head. So you tell him your name, and he'd figure out all your numbers in his head, and it blew my mind that somebody could tell you about your personality off the top of their head, and he had just met me. All right.
So it
that's
wasn't
how I got
down
it.
or anything.
Pardon me?
He wouldn't write the numbers down or do calculations?
No, he did it all in his head.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my first exposure to the numerology. And then I wanted to learn to read tarot cards, and I was traveling. And I got a book, and I taught myself to read cards, and I did numerology at the same time. And it took me about, I think, a month. And that was in 1997. 97 or 96, I can't remember. And then in 99, I was looking for an astrology teacher, and then I met somebody through all these rather strange circumstances, and they knew an astrology teacher that was looking for a student. So that old adage of when the student's ready, the teacher shows up, that actually happened to me.
Okay. Tell us about your teacher.
About what?
Tell us about your teacher.
He was an interesting character. See, I'm a Scorpion and he's an Aquarian. So for people that know, those two signs don't really work well together because they're both fixed signs. And Scorpio's fixed water, he's fixed air. So it's more everything's an idea, and I kind of like things to work a certain way. But he was an amazing teacher. He also would know where your placements were because either he had memorized where the planets were or he was calculating it in his head. But either way, it's still impressive.
Sure. And the system you use right now, you combine astrology with numerology and tarot. So how does that work?
Well, yes, because I think it was 87 or 98. Hold on, let me just turn off my phone. Sorry. Because otherwise it'll just keep beeping. A friend of mine said, well, you're reading, but you should do timing. So I spent trying to figure out timing. So over tarot and numerology, and then I'd bring in a bit of astrology, like looking at the sun sign, the moon sign, Mercury and Mars. And that was strictly out of the ephemeris, right? And then about 2012, developing this, and I had the system where every number from 1 to 2. People tell me numbers, I'll calculate in my head what it means. If it's 3 numbers, if it's 1 number, I actually have a book full of numbers that I actually took me about 3 months to write out.
Yeah, no, it's actually one of the first things we talked about when we first met. You were carrying this book.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Okay, so why is it that 3 numbers are so important here? What do they represent?
Well, that's a good question, and I've never actually thought of it. It's actually quite important. So if you think about it, you have past, present, and future. Even in terms of time usually has 3 categories, right? You have your hours, minutes, your seconds, your day, months, your years. And if you relate that back to the astrology, you have the sun, the moon, and the ascendant, which is basically like your hour, your minute, and your second hand. So what I ended up doing was using the 3 numbers as a way to read the person's subconscious / unconscious mind. And then I have a formula where I use those numbers to create a future chart. So for me, if a person gives me 3 numbers, there's a short story that goes with it. Plus, I calculate what the future date is. I draw up a chart for that future date, and that generally answers about 70 to 90% of their questions, with timing including.
Awesome. So someone just comes up to you, gives you 3 random numbers, and then you can just go from there. You don't even need to be told a question.
That's right. That's basically how I read. Is I ask the person for 3 numbers, and the numbers will give me an idea of what direction it's in, and then it also creates the future chart. The other thing that I've actually found out with the numbers, which is kind of interesting, is it takes me a little bit of time to figure it out, though, is if someone gives me 3 numbers and I look at the future chart, I can tell them what points are aspecting their natal without seeing their natal.
So you can basically rebuild their birth charts just from 3 random numbers that they give you.
Well, no, I can't rebuild the whole chart, but I'll know where there'll be 2 or 3 points in their chart that are being aspected. So it may not be, they may not have a planet on that point, but they're going to have a planet aspect in that point within 2 degrees.
Okay, and this is because numbers correlate very strongly to the energy of planets then, isn't it?
Well, that's right. And that's actually my entire system was based on creating the correspondence between numbers and astrology.
Okay, cool. And all of this, of course, links into tarot and to palmistry too.
That's right. That's right. And actually, the system started with me doing tarot, where people showed up and I didn't have my cards with me. So the idea popped into my head, but just read 3 numbers. So I started reading 3 numbers, and then it ended up growing to the point where I was able to work the numbers back to the astrology.
It's funny how these things work, isn't it? Sometimes when you experiment, it just happens. It's like when you don't have an ingredient for something you're cooking, you experiment, you're making something even better.
That's right. That's right. And a lot of what I do is basically either someone, like the thing with the timing, that was suggested to me because I never thought about it when I first started reading. The idea of the 3 numbers, that also popped into my head. So ideas will come to me, but then I'll try to test them out. So I spent every time I have an idea, I test it out with clients or with querents rather.
So they're your guinea pigs.
Well, yes. So what ends up happening is at every stage of my development, I'll offer people free readings when I'm testing an idea. So when I first did the 3 numbers, I think I did about something like 50 to 70 readings. And when I was presenting the 3 numbers with the astrological system to a bunch of astrologers, I think I looked at about 100 charts to have about 15 that I could use that really showed the best side of it.
Okay, cool. Well, that's an interesting point that you make. You should always be developing yourself and your skill set. I know a lot of astrologers around the world, they read a couple books and they think they know it all, and they're so-called experts. They don't spend years and decades improving their skill set.
Well, yeah. There's 2 things I'd say about that. Is one, I was forced to do that because I was working as a psychic, and I had a new family, so it was a bit of pressure there to basically get it right. And what would happen periodically is the method I would use would stop working, and then I'd have to find a new way to read. And I never really got a bit of heads up as when that was going to happen. So now I always have, like, I try to develop a few different skill sets. So what I may do is, like, if I'm doing the astrology and it's not as easy to get the answer out for like the 4th or 5th question, I might switch to the cards or the numbers. Yeah. I also would say, yep, sorry.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, explain how that works, because as palmists, a line on the hand is always have the same meaning. How is it that in your system something can work one day and then stop working the next?
That's also a really good question, and I think that what it comes down to is there's a saying, I think, in Chinese astrology, is when you're reading somebody, you should look up and notice the first thing that catches your eye, because that anchors the anchors the reading in the now, right? So if the person's
Yeah.
coming to you, they've got some issue in the past that's led them here, and they've got some issue in the future they want to resolve. But you're also dealing with the now. So I think it's important to have those three anchor points, which is again goes back to the three numbers. Yeah. And
Okay.
the reason why I think it changes for me is three numbers. I'm not going to say the same thing if somebody asks me the same numbers the next day. Uh, because it's very situational. The same way if you draw up a chart for right now, it's going to be very different than if you draw up the same chart tomorrow when it pops into your head to draw up the chart. So for me, it's very much being in the moment.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. In fact, on the topic of developing your own system, we did this last year. In fact, one of our subscribers, we sent out a call asking for volunteers.
That's right.
System where someone would pick a number between 1 to 108.
Mm.
We would calculate what their question was, produce
That's right.
a chart or produce an astrology chart, then figure out where the corresponding lines were on that person's hand.
Mm.
Plug this into tarot and we assigned a meditation for them.
That's right.
There were about 50 or 100 volunteers that we had in that little experiment. We were actually eliminating lines off someone's hands within a matter of 3 or 4 days of meditation.
It's
talk to us a
impressive.
little bit about that.
Well, more. I think maybe you should speak on that one a bit more because it's really you're the brain trust on that one. So, and again, the thing that I really enjoy working with you is you're on the Vedic side, but there's still things that I have to come across or do that seem to be applicable to the Vedic side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, tell us a little bit about that because you use mostly Western astrology and Western numbers, I'm assuming. How does that
That's right.
or is it against the Indian system, or is there?
No, I don't. And this is the thing. And this was what I wanted to say earlier, but I lost my train of thought. Is astrologers will tell you something doesn't work, or they'll tell you something does work. And I think that's not the whole story. What they should say, or what I always say, is it works for me, or it
Sure.
doesn't work for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I was starting out, I was looking at progressions and transits, and I don't use progressions because I don't like them actually. I don't like the fact that they're constrained. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
because you're looking at progressions, the only planet that really moves is the moon, and then your ascendant. So so philosophically, it doesn't grab me, which is part of the reason why I don't think it works for me. And you will find astrologers that will find that techniques work for them, but don't work for other people, which is kind of, I don't think there's any other science that's like that, where the tool works for one person, but not for someone else.
Sure.
Hmm.
All right, cool. So thank you very much for coming on to our channel today. What's the best way for someone to get a hold of you?
Probably the best way is I've got 2 pages on Facebook. One's called To Converse, where I post ideas about astrology and also some predictions. The other one is basically, yeah, To Converse is the best because the other one is my personal Facebook page. But I think there's a limit to how many friends I could have, and quite honestly, I'm not adding that many friends. So the best way to get in touch with me is through To Converse which is my Facebook page.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for the chat, Del. We've got to have you back on this channel again. I think maybe next what we'll do is we'll set up an interview where we have a chat and people can actually throw numbers out at you and you can do live readings for them so they can actually test your system.
Yeah, well, there's another project that I've been doing on and off. It's called the Magic Minute. And it's a bit like electional astrology. And what it is the person tells me what type of day they want to have. And then I work out the best time for them to leave the house down to the second. Now, the thing with this is you actually have to leave exactly at that time. And what I've found is very few people seem to be able to do it, even though I'll warn them and say, look, in your particular case, someone's going to distract you. Doesn't seem to matter. But I've used it for myself and for my partner, and it's actually been That's been very, very impressive.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely have you on for that.
Yep, most definitely. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks a lot, Del. Now, if you guys do have questions on this, put them in the comment section below. And the next time we do have Del on the channel, we'll make sure we give you guys a heads up so you can type out your numbers and he can answer them for you. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, Sulabh.